Yeah. All right. So anyway, all right. So yeah, just to start the session here, this was a hand I wanted to look at before we did the Odin grind with Pete. I thought this was by far the most interesting spot I had of the day yesterday. So essentially, what happens is I ended up checking back the flop here. This is 30 bigs effective button versus big blind. I definitely think we're going to have a fair amount of checks here. And my assumption was that we probably get checks with flushes here. So I ended up rolling low and I ended up checking. I think we can definitely bet this hand as well. On the turn, I think we can be fairly aggressive. I think we're going to have a lot of ace-x hands in our check back range. Also, we kind of want to be betting on the bigger side here to put a lot of pressure on his like 7x, his 6-4s, his like king sixes, stuff like that. So yeah, so anyway, we ended up betting like two-thirds pot on the turn. And then we get the offsuit king on the river. And I ended up jamming for a 2x pot here. And the initial thing that I said is that I would have flushes here that I would check back on the flop. Uh, like I said, I would definitely check back ace king of clubs, ace queen of clubs, king queen of clubs, at least at some frequency. Maybe even some king jack of clubs. And so if we're checking back clubs here on the flop, then I definitely think this line is okay. Where I'm curious to see is if Odin actually checks back the flop with flushes, or if they just full weight bet every single flush that they have here. If they do, obviously, like my assumptions are going to be off, and then my line doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But and like I said that at the end of the video as well, like it's kind of interesting to see what my opponent here kind of assumes. Because if he assumes that I never have flushes in my check back range, then maybe it makes more sense for him to hero the spot off. But I definitely said that I do. So, but that being said, my assumptions might not be accurate. So yeah, I guess we can go from there.
All right. All right. So yeah, now we've already ran the sim on Odin, so now we can check to see if his assumptions
He
about
heroed with
checking
ace
back
deuce of
flushes
diamonds for what it's worth. So
are true.
yeah, and I did say immediately like my initial instinct was that this probably isn't a great hero here. Like I'm repping flushes, so it probably makes a little more sense. Not for the overall like hand strength that he has, but more so that like since I'm kind of repping flushes here, I think that he probably should be calling like some hands. Like I even think like 7-8 with the eight of clubs would be a better call here than ace deuce of diamonds. Oh, and the on the flip side, something I forgot to completely mention. On the turn, when I bet two-thirds pot, he kind of like snap called. So also I'm taking some other assumptions that Odin might not show us because since he just snap called on the turn, I'm putting him on a lot of like 7-5, 6-4, weak aces. Like I don't think he ever has like a two pair plus hand, pretty much. So because of the timing of his call on the turn, which also kind of incentivized me to be a little bit more aggressive. But I think even without that, I think I still like my line if we do check back flushes. So yeah,
And you can see we're
right.
doing a lot of checking flushes on the spot. So your assumption there was on point.
Okay, sweet. And we are checking back like 40% of the time, which is a fair amount. It's actually not as
Yeah.
much as I would have thought. I thought this would be like kind of like 50-50, although I mean it's pretty close. I just think this is probably one of the worst boards for us, but maybe the fact that we're opening from the button, I think it's a little bit better for us because we're going to have some of those like wider opens as assumed like if we open from the hijack or low jack, we're not really going to have a lot of these like 7-6 suited, 5-4 suited, pocket threes, stuff like that. So maybe this is a little bit better or this board isn't as bad for us opening from the button as if we open from an earlier position. But yeah, we're still checking quite a bit anyway, so that's interesting to see. So the ace on the turn, he's doing, what was that,
80%
80,
checking.
85% check?
Yeah.
Yeah, and usually
Is
these
that
ace X's on the turn are pretty high frequency check anyway, mainly because I'm going to have a lot of ace X's in my check back range. He's also going to be lacking a lot of like strong ace X in his range because at 30 bigs, button versus big blind, he probably lacks a lot of those strong ace X's. Yeah, you can see here the strongest ace X he's going to have is like ace 9. So I think just in general, big blind does a lot of checking. I would actually just like check pure here, although it does tell you to be betting 15% and it should be for the larger size since you're obviously polarized in the spot. I would just pure check here. So yeah, he
yeah?
checked anyway. So
Anyways, well, what I'm showing, what I'm bringing up here is the number of flushes you end up here on the turn,
okay.
which is saying 8.6 combos out of your 202, a 4%,
Mm-hmm.
which is isn't a lot, but it's not. It's also something. So,
Hmm.
so you're definitely showing up here there. So I think your line's credible. And then if I had to guess, your exact combo is probably betting basically what you bet. Yeah, you have the queen of clubs, 10 hearts.
Yeah, I don't know if I rolled on the turn. I think I was just going to be like high frequency bet with the queen of clubs, and then maybe I'd roll a little bit more with the ten of clubs since it would be a weaker flush draw. But queen of clubs actually checking back here a little more than I thought. At least I did use the best size here. I bet exactly 2/3 pot on the turn. I was kind of wondering if we have flushes in our check back range, if maybe we get overbet on the turn, although that doesn't seem like super credible, I guess. Um, and like I said earlier, he like check called really quickly. So I'm really putting him on like a 7-5, a 6-4, an ace deuce, like basically a one pair hand or like a middle pair and a straight draw or a middle pair and a flush draw. I think his timing kind of gave some stuff away. So I did want to be a little bit more aggressive, and I said mainly I'm going to be overbet jamming with mostly flushes on the river. But because I think he's like one pair oriented, I might throw hands like ace six or ace three into my overbet jam range, just because I think he might be a little bit weaker because of the timing he took on the turn. But in theory, I think probably just the majority of our overbet jam range is going to be hands that contain clubs, since we're essentially like repping flushes there, and then we probably have smaller bets with like ace queen, and then maybe some two pair. So so boom, did I nail it?
As you can, you nailed it.
Fuck. All right. Okay, I don't
No
feel so bad.
shame. No
so
punt.
well, okay, so I guess the other thing that I want to see is like, okay, so pocket aces is not betting for the massive size. That makes a lot of sense because we block a lot of his like hero calling range with a hand like that. But I guess I'm more curious if like 7-6 suited or ace 7 suited, ace 6 suited. I guess we don't have ace 7 suited, but we definitely have ace 6 suited, ace 3 suited. If those hands get thrown into the overbet range, even without clubs here, and it does look like some of them get in there, so that's good to see. So uh, yeah, okay. So, and again, I guess the other thing I was asking myself is, do we have overbet jams with like two pair plus in this spot, or are they just mostly flush oriented? Because I think mainly we want to be using the very large size with clubs, and it does look like a little bit of two pair gets in there, even as thin as ace ten.
7 suited.
Yeah,
And then it's king 8 suited, or that's probably the flush. Yeah, never mind.
yeah, yeah. So, or maybe the ace ten could be a flush as well, but. I think as I was saying on chat for some of you guys that were in there, like if he's just gonna snap with ace deuce every time, and I'm gonna be balanced like bluffs to value here, especially if I think like he's not as strong as he could be when he kind of like has a timing tell on the turn, I'm going to use the like overbet size even thinner than Odin might tell me to. So if he's just calling a hand like ace deuce every single time, then I think he's probably just gonna end up paying me off more often than not. Yeah, it looks like he is calling. So that was the other thing.
To fold the ace 9 and the ace 8, which is actually something I was going to suggest, was that the deuce actually maybe not interacting with a lot of your delayed continues might actually make the ace deuce a better hero call than these ace 9 and ace 8s,
Yeah,
which appears to be the case.
I don't know if I brought up that specific point, but I did say initially that I kind of hated his call with the ace deuce, and then I think after I let it set for a while, I was kind of thinking what his best hero calls are, because obviously I don't think he can just call everything with a club in it, you know. So it does make a whole lot more sense that he is heroing with like ace deuce, and basically hands that block my straight draws that are going to be bluffing a lot here. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. I did kill him a little bit more than I thought initially, but kind of lightened up. So still surprised to see ace deuce diamonds as calling there as much as it is, but you know, what can you do?
Yeah, and just to emphasize, if people didn't pick up on why ace deuce is better than ace 8 or ace 9, it's because a lot of his bluffs, which we can see, or a lot of Kurt's bluffs, as we can see, are going to contain an 8 and a 9 in it. And so having those cards in your hand, so like the where we at, like the 10-9 offs, the 8-9 offs, etc., our hands are going to be blasting off here. So so that makes those worse heroes. All right.
Cool. Well,
should
it's
we
far more.
battling, or
Yeah, we can. Or yeah, I guess if anybody else wants to, because a bunch of these guys I think were actually in while this hand was going on. I know Kenny was because he clipped it for me. I'm not sure if Bob Dog and That's the Move were in there, but I definitely had them on my stream for quite a while yesterday. So appreciate the love, too, boys. It was fun first day back. minus the fact that we got crushed, but it was fun anyway. Yeah. So any comments you guys might have about this spot? I know Kenny's got a little bit to say about this anyway, and I think what you were saying too about does he ever fold in the spot because he doesn't perceive me to ever have flushes here, or he just thinks like I'm overweight bluffing. I think you were kind of leaning in that direction. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that or not, or if we basically covered everything you had to bring up, basically. Guess we're chilling. All right, let's. Oh, I gotta go to the training sessions part. My bad. One sec, can't talk yet. Okay, so Kenny's got like 30 to 60 seconds before he's going to be back, so we can wait on that.
And you can look at some of the other heroes where, like, I noticed it's like Queen 7 with the Queen of Clubs is always calling.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of something I was leaning on as well. Like, I think I said I like calling like 8-7 with the 8 of clubs better than a hand like Ace Deuce of Diamonds. Because I think like having a club makes quite a bit, but it might not make sense. I mean, going back to what we were saying about blockers, maybe having an 8 is bad, and that's why maybe like calling Queen 7 with the Queen of Clubs is better than 8-7 with the 8 of Clubs.
Because those 8x and 9x combos are going to just be blasting off.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, even the Queen 6, Queen of Clubs. So it's assuming that you're going to bluff with the Queen of Clubs a lot. Wait, hold on. No, actually.
Yeah, this is a great learning spot, frankly, because I'm not really ever jamming this river. I'm maybe over betting and leaving myself 6 or 7 big blinds behind, even with my value hands. Maybe that's a style thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do think if you're thinking exploitative versus Salt or GTO type stuff, this play makes a lot more sense the more studied your opponents are, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But on the exploitative side, I'm not sure most opponents, unless I know they're good, are going to put the dots together and make a fold here. Because I think I was actually really surprised he had Ace Deuce here, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So
I think that's a very small part of his range there, don't you?
Well, his range that calls down, or that just that he has that hand in the first place.
Like once he calls the turn, I don't know. Maybe that's a mistake for me not to include Ace Deuce in this range here, but I'm just not considering that in that spot probably. Not in real time.
I was gonna say, why don't you think he has Ace Deuce in the spot?
This probably has something to do with my own bias and style. Probably I just feel like a lot of the time when you're betting the turn here, well, not maybe a lot of the time, but it's very possible you have like an ace with a club as well, which would be ideal. But I just feel like if I'm gonna have to call the turn, I'm most likely against you, better player, gonna have to call a big river bet, and I frankly just don't want to do that with Ace Deuce because, like, if for some reason you have a bigger ace, which is probably possible with your line, can we take a look at your range there a bit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah,
you're on the right, I'm assuming, right?
This is in position right here. So we're down to kind of the nitty gritty here because the shove has already happened. Maybe I need to back up a second.
Yeah, can you show the range on the turn, maybe?
Yeah, we can do that.
Before the bet? Yeah.
And I guess if, just while Pete's getting this going, if I could touch on what you said about not wanting to call with Ace Deuce on the turn because you might have to face a big river bet. I don't think that's necessarily how we should be looking at it. I think your hand is good enough to be calling on the turn, but you shouldn't be calling on the turn to be like, okay, I have to call every single river here, and that's just not the case. Like, you can easily like check call the turn. Obviously, I have bluffs as we see here, but then on the flip side, you're gonna have like safe rivers where you can call down, like like the one they had. But then you can fold on like any club, any 4, any 5, like these really bad cards. So you don't necessarily just have to fold a spot because it might get uncomfortable on the river. I think you should just play each street for what it is and then reevaluate once you get to that next spot. So, and that's something that I kind of did myself in the past a lot. I would fold like an uncomfortable position on the turn because I didn't want things to get awkward on the river. But I just don't think that's how we should be going about our thought process. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I guess I just wanted to touch on that.
Just think of what you're even saying. Like I don't want to do something because it's going to make me uncomfortable. Like
Hmm.
that's definitely not in like the process oriented approach that we're attempting to implement. That
Definitely makes sense.
Yeah, spots are
Definitely.
gonna get
Well,
uncomfortable.
of course, you're still human, and of course, like those things still happen, like in game, and it's good to be
Frankly,
cognizant to develop the self awareness, like to know that like this is perhaps an area where I'm making mistakes, where I have leaks. So
Hmm.
that's a good first step to just know that it exists.
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And I would say a large proportion of my leaks are on the mental side. It's definitely something I'm working on heavy. So appreciate the feedback, boys.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
don't
and
be
I
afraid.
know I know I mentioned that I'm going to start whipping together some sort of mental game mastery type of course. I don't know exactly what angle we're going to take with it yet, but it'll be in the near future, let's say.
Hmm. Yeah, and definitely don't be.
That's the move mentioned. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go
That's
ahead.
the move just mentioned. I'm mostly not shoving river with a flush strong hand versus a weaker player that super snaps that turn. So I think a 66% pot bet works very close to the same versus that player type and their range in the spot.
Um, okay, so the first thing I want to touch on here is that this is why it's good for us to study with Odin because we can at least know what our like general strategy is going to be, and that's kind of the element that we're going to know beyond beyond question. Like we know what our range is going to be because we think about it, we construct it, all that happens. Where things get tricky is when we start making assumptions about our opponents because like we can't just be like, oh, like he's never folding an ace here. Like there's just no way for us to know that. You know what I mean? All we can really do is take like our solid baseline and kind of go from there. Now there are obviously exceptions. I think I ran into a few players in the Sunday Mill. Actually, there was one guy. I think I ended up giving up on the river where I'm just like, okay, this is not the guy to bluff, and that's because I had a certain amount of hands on him. So yes, in a sense that is true in some scenarios, but you have to have like a pretty good read on the situation that this player is not going to be folding like middle mediocre strength hands. While like at the same time, I also didn't have any kind of history with this player, so I was just kind of going off of my my baseline play and just like relying on my own assumptions and how I would structure the hand with certain parts of my range, as opposed to being like, oh, he's gonna snap if I overbet. Like he's gonna call just as often if I bet 2/3 here as opposed if I just jam here. So the reality is that if I jam, I'm still putting max pressure on him. You know what I mean? And if he's calling a jam, like he's obviously gonna call 2/3 pot, and I'm just like making a bet that's absolutely never winning. When if I overbet, like at least there's a chance. Like he tanked anyway, and but he ended up calling. And then the flip side is like when we actually have it and we go like 2/3, 2/3, and we're like, okay, well they're never folding when he just snap calls the turn. Then when we bet on the river, we're not making as much money when we actually have a hand as we would be if we just bet like 2/3, 2/3. You know what I mean? So I think it kind of gets
Yeah.
dangerous to start making assumptions about your opponent unless you have like a really solid history behind them and just know that they're really not going to fold. And then I'm kind of more okay with giving up in spots like that. But I think it's better for us to just kind of base our overall game plan over how we construct our own range. And I think it's a lot easier for us to be making more sound decisions and less mistakes if we're just kind of going off of our own range as opposed to trying to figure out what somebody we've never played with is going to be thinking. You know what I mean? Because they might not even know what they're thinking. They might just be clicking buttons. So, how can we make assumptions on their play if they don't even know what they're doing? You know what I mean?
It
Yeah.
might not even be a total pattern.
Yeah.
But yeah, and as you can see, the EV difference between the 2/3 bet and the all-in bet, like with your flushes, is 0.16, which is not insignificant. And even on the bluff, like you're making 0.07 more big blinds in GTO world, which again, obviously your opponents aren't playing exact perfect ranges against you, so this is still just an approximation, but it at least demonstrates that there is a not insignificant difference between both plays, even though 0.07 might not seem that significant.
No, it absolutely isn't. So that's pretty interesting. I expected to see more of an EV difference between the two plays. So you might actually be onto something, Kenny, when you talk about that, because obviously, like, it's great to make the best plays, but we obviously like, we want to be making high EV decisions as well. And if there's, a minuscule difference between 2/3 and overbet, then you might be onto something based on what we perceive the general population to be doing in the spot, I guess. So, interesting spot there for sure. So, let's battle.
And now how to implement. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I was gonna say now how to implement like your exploitative decision making in terms of like I'm only gonna like do the all in with my value and only block with the 2/3, whatever that gets tricky too, and it's just gonna tie yourself into knots.
Right.
So that's the one other thing to think about when you're out on a limb on a lot of these spots in terms of your assumptions about population and whatnot. But anyway, let's go.
So we doing cutoff versus button?
Cutoff versus button 30, and I have it for both positions. So one thing I've noticed right away is that Odin does a lot of trapping at 30 that I do not see in real life. So I'm actually kind of curious about why this is happening. But like it's just flatting queens off 30 here, button versus cutoff.
I think this is going to be a low frequency flat. I think like kings and aces get in there a little bit more. Also from the later position opens, you're going to have your opponents have like pretty wide ranges here. So I think that's why it's okay to flat. Also, the shorter the stacks, the better it is to flat because you have less incentive to like 3-bet and try to get all the chips in when you're 100 big blinds deep, because you can still get it in on 3 streets. So there is a little bit more trapping. I'm still going to assume that queens is like a low frequency trap here, and kings and aces are a little bit more high frequency. But yeah, we can check that out after we go through the hand.
I'm thinking on this type of board, I mean, maybe even with our exact combo, even though normally you're thinking in a range situation, when you're this nutted, probably just a block, even though it seems like a board that's going to favor some bigger bet.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we do get some big bet here. I myself would never bet big here, I don't think, just because, we smash the board. It's kind of hard for him to, like, we want him to continue with the weaker parts of his range. I mean, if he ends up, there's very few runouts that we're going to have here where we don't stack off. So I guess if he gets there, he gets there. Now, I guess the other thing I'll say is, do we ever check here? Do we ever check with, like, queens and jacks? Or pocket fives, for that matter?
Okay, so I think he's going to have enough hands to continue on like his give ups where we have such low equity that like you're just not going to get money in against them like on turns and rivers most of the time anyway. So it's not, you're not going to be too worried about those hands. But like he's still going to call like 6s, 7s, 8s, whatever. Versus small. So I would say, let's see. Yeah, those get checked. Oh, whoops! That's a stupid thing.
That's all right. We can go back to it at some point.
Oh, and he's a king 8 on the cutoff too.
Yeah, that's pretty aggro. Now what I was gonna say is that with queens and jacks, I think queens bets a little more high frequency and jacks might trap a little bit more. This might be from out of position. This might be a little bit different. So, yeah, we'll see what they do here anyway. I guess I won't go too much on that because I'm thinking kind of a different spot. So let's go back to So queens is actually in there a little bit more than I thought too. Queens looks like it's in there at least like 40%. Jacks as well. And okay, so I
actually do check here a lot, frankly, in real time.
So I guess the other thing I was gonna say, what's good about trapping, and it kind of makes more sense to be trapping these hands if you're playing against opponents who are capable of squeezing from the small blind and big blind quite aggressively. You do have like snap calls that you can have here. Now I think trapping these hands becomes less valuable when you're playing against people who are just like calling too much, not 3-bet squeezing enough. And so against those kind of players, I would just fast play my hands. But if we're playing against some capable players who are gonna like find a 3-bet squeeze jam with a hand like like ace-5 suited, stuff like that, I might trap here a little bit more. So that's kind of I think relevant information here in this spot.
Agreed.
EV difference is absolutely negligible. So if you have those extra factors to push you in one direction or the other, you have to take advantage of those.
I agree.
which is a good example of like how to mix the GTO and the exploitative concepts together.
Yeah,
By
and
the way.
I was gonna say
You
another
have
thing
to.
that I really
You
like.
do.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. The other thing that I really like about these
So go ahead.
spots here is that, at least from what I've noticed, is these are probably the most understudied spots I've had because a lot of my PO solver work came from playing 100 big blind cash, and a lot of my sims don't actually have calling in position because in these higher rate games they just mostly play like 3-bet or fold from like in position. Like the button would basically play a pretty high frequency 3-bet or fold strategy to avoid paying high rake. Now obviously you don't see that when you're playing 20 to 30 big blind effective poker, no rake, and an ante game. So there's going to be a lot more calling here. And what I notice in these spots quite a bit from both positions is that you do a lot of mixing in these spots, like with top pair, with flush draws, like way more mixing than I ever would have thought. So I guess can we just go back to the flop? And I'm just curious, like how often we check back, like king queen, queen nine, queen 10, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, let me turn this off. Or turn it on. So yeah, it's kind of about the same frequency as you are with sets.
Mm-hmm.
Queen jack's like, oh duh, fair, I'm smart. Queen ten's like kind of pure check. So like your weaker queens.
And I'll definitely say this from the general population that I run into anyway is that they play like a really face-up strategy in these spots here. Now, I don't know why there's so much mixing going on in these spots, but every time I run these spots, there's like a ton of mixing with top pairs, with flush draws, straight draws, things of that nature. So I'm most like curious to figure out, why we're mixing so much in specific spots, but it's definitely something I recognize. Like I feel like if we're playing against some random opponent and they have king queen here on the button and we check to them at the cutoff, like they're just going to bet here every single time, and we can see here that that's just not the case. And I think it's kind of interesting to find out why we want to be trapping here so much with a hand like this. So but the bottom line is there's just a lot of mixing going on in these spots, at least with hands that I would perceive to be a pretty high frequency bet when we're checked to.
So like out of position, still gonna have more top pairs. Obviously gonna have more over pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's probably just sort of a way, like it's a board that you're gonna want to check maybe more than is intuitive on the kind of dry, and that's just a way to protect your range when they're going to do some sort of delayed bluff because they have what appears to be a range advantage
Mm-hmm.
on this board.
Assuming that we're trapping as much as we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always find these spots super interesting, and I think if we can get good in these spots, I think these are like, at least from what I've seen from Odin and Pio, that the general population, even like stronger regs, I think are just being way too face up, like on the button when they're checked to here. They're just like full weight betting with like king queen 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 10.
Especially like you're in the middle of a Sunday, you have 10 tables going. Like it's hard to like be like precise in these spots.
Mm-hmm.
And to just kind of default, because like the default would be to bet. If you have this and you have like 7 other decisions like begging your attention, like yeah. And in reality that might be an okay like default to have, because like you're not like losing anything by betting, but obviously you do want to protect your range in like the long run.
Yeah, so and
I
that's
don't hate a lead here either, like a small lead, because the more I think about this spot, yeah, a check makes sense with like when you like slap the flop. Let's say if queens or jacks here, but like I think this flop's pretty good for our range too. Maybe I'm wrong with that assumption. I'll have to take a look at the entire range.
From the button or the cutoff?
Oh.
Because we're on the button with queens.
Oh, my bad.
Are you talking about the cutoff, like his c-betting range?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely we should check back then.
Well,
a lot. Even with our strong hands here, because I think there's some turns that make him comfortable that are non-spades as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're... wow, I was going to say I would definitely expect to see some check back. I mean, some c-bet here from...
Yeah, the cutoff is basically pure checking, something we didn't quite noticed before.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Which
No,
suddenly makes like which makes the checking make a lot more sense because like you're against an uncapped range, so
mm-hmm.
you gotta play accordingly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Smart.
I was gonna say let's go back to the villain's like c betting range from the cutoff here. But if he's checking everything, it definitely makes a whole lot more sense why they're mixing up their play because they have every single hand in their range still. So yeah, definitely.
Why do you think this isn't a pure check? Like, I would think this would be pure check, and he actually
probably just because the sims that they ran weren't ran to absolute 100% accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit just gets thrown in there just by the imprecision.
Right.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't have solver experience, so that was a genuine question there.
Yeah. So when you run assault, like when you run pyro or whatever, like as it runs, there will be like a little like percentage marker in terms of like how close it is to 100% accurate, and like to get like most people stop theirs at like 0.5% because to get from like that 0.5% to like 0.01% takes like as much or more time than it takes to get like all the way down to that 0.5%. So it's just not worth the effort in terms of like whatever extra insights you're gonna get. Like,
also, what do you suggest we use for that rounding? It says round strat to nearest 0% on the bottom there. Do you suggest we keep that at 0, or what do you prefer there?
Yeah, I would say yes, just so you can see every single bet size that they're incorporating here, because like you might find some bet sizes that aren't being used at a high frequency, but still get in there a little bit. So obviously here it doesn't really matter because we're not really betting at all. So that's just to kind of clean up a little bit of, just make it look a little neater. If you have like 4 or 5.
So that doesn't change the math at all. It just changes the visual.
Right.
Correct.
Because that's what I thought at first too, Kenny. Actually, that it was just going to cut out those bet sizes, but it just hides them from actually being there.
Appreciate that, guys.
All right.
Go to another.
Yep.
I guess I got closest tab. It's been even more barked at me more for having multiple tabs up. I think they changed something. A6 off. I'm going to guess this would be a pure check.
We check here.
It's a pretty dry board.
Well, I mean, I think we probably still check here quite a bit. That's why I was kind of surprised on the other board. I think 2 broadways is like pretty good for our range in the cutoff. Also, like ranges are going to be fairly wide in that previous spot, so I was surprised to see some like basically a pure check back. This one, since it is, I'm assuming we still mainly check and maybe get some big bet here. Not necessarily with this hand, but.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed is you can see it'll actually in real time show you the EV difference. Like, see how it says 0.63 under check,
oh,
0.59 over 15%, etc.
Okay.
That's one good reason I have all this stuff unchecked.
All right, nice.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is also how I think it calculates if it's plus 100 perfect or like plus 92 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like plus 92, it's not the most favored play, and then it like somehow calculates that 92 based on the EV difference between that and the most optimal.
When my first 2 weeks using Odin, I literally just had the default settings and it was just skipping all of this gold. Like, this is the most valuable part of the trainer, I would think.
Right.
Says 2 overs, backdoor ace high. It's a wide range. Seems like it's like probably like pretty close to break even between call and fold.
Yeah.
I think this is a flow.
Yeah. So obviously, if we have backdoor flush draw, I think we're just pure calling here. Without it, maybe this hand shows down a little bit worse. So we might even get some check raise here because this is starting to get a little bit loose. I think for the size though, it's probably kind of hard to give it up here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of check raise here, and like maybe even mix all 3 options, like check raise and check call and do some folding too. So kind of curious. Just do what you would do here, Pete, I guess.
So fold was definitely. So yeah, it is all pretty close to break even.
Mm-hmm.
As we can tell, but we are losing, and probably so yeah.
So it does have a little bit of
Check raise
raise.
is better than call.
So
Yeah, the smaller raise is actually better than call. It's not totally
yeah, because it
insurmountable.
does have some stuff going for it, but it just kind of plays pretty bad on other streets, and I guess getting an immediate fold is
Right.
kind of cool. Obviously, I think with like the
Yeah.
backdoor flush draw, it's gonna pure continue.
Since this is a check raise situation, just a bet.
Without a diamond,
I would.
probably not.
Might be a check call.
Um,
I think it's probably going to do a check raise because he either has nothing or he also has an ace, and an ace is going to have to bet. And like at least some of the flush draw combos are going to bet the turn, or like the ace X combos are probably never going to bet the turn. I guess the other question then would be how many of them are betting the flop, but for small size, probably a decent amount.
so I would guess that it's either gonna block here or check, but I think if we do face a bet here, then it's probably going to check call. I don't know. I mean, we obviously block the hand that he's going to hero us with. That's worse with the ace. So, yeah, I think this six in general is probably pretty bad for check raise. And that being said, I don't even know if we get check raise here without a diamond because I just don't know what's going to call us. That's worse than our hand.
The the EVs on literally every option there were so close.
Yeah, which is also a good insight that like so many poker spots just like almost doesn't matter what you do if you're playing good ranges pre-flop. That in a lot of these marginal spots, it's kind of hard to like totally muck it up.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
there
Yeah.
literally wasn't a bad option there. Like check to jam was like a .4 big blind difference. It was like between 11 and 11.4, something like that.
mhm. But then again, it's also important to note, like, okay, if the solver is like, even though the EV difference is minuscule, it's still important to kind of try to figure out why, like the solver like still heavily favors one play over another, even though the EV difference is pretty minuscule. So I think that's always important to look into that. But I guess the relieving thing is that you can still like make quote unquote mistakes, and they're very marginal mistakes at that. So yeah. Anyway, let's kind of dig into what we want to do here on the river, I guess. Like if we can make villain bet, for one, I want to see what the size is, and for two, I want to see if our hand is good enough for check raising. I'm going to guess it's not. If our villain is betting like 2/3 here on the river, and
It's almost super betting. It's almost always an all-in. Actually, this is the main bet.
and
Which then we're always calling. So that's kind of
I was gonna say, and why do you think it's only using the size?
because it's just polarizing spot on a 4 straight board.
What else? What else is it saying though? Okay. Well,
I'm not exactly sure where you're leading me here.
oh no. Well, yeah. Well, the other thing that it's saying is for value, we can't really bet hands stronger than like a six, or a hand's weaker than a six, so we can't go for like thin value with like a hand like look even like ace four is checking back, ace jack is checking back pretty high frequency.
But Grease is checking that.
Yeah, like it's even like
Oh yeah, but yeah, the ace next to.
so we're using a polarized size here because we can only bet like the very top of our range. Like we don't have any thin value with a hand like 5-4 suited here, or things like that. So and this is kind of something that I've noticed a lot, and Odin's pointed that out a whole lot easier because they just incorporate all these big sizes as well. So it's always kind of important to find out when we're only value betting like the very top of our range, and when we don't have very thin value bets, because when these spots happen, we usually just end up using like very polarized sizes when we're only repping the very top of our range, or like only the very best bluff candidates pretty much. So I think this is going to be great. Go ahead.
Like ace king no diamond is a pure fold, then you're seeing it.
And that's great too. So like if we end up bluffing and we get them to fold hands like that, which I would still be pretty surprised in game if we do get people to fold those hands, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But that also means like if we're doing this with the nuts, then they're just going to pay us off every single time. So we're actually going to be making more money in these spots, because I think we're going to have, if he's just never folding, then it gets kind of interesting. Like I think we just probably have more 6x and flushes if than he does when he's just hero calling his ace x. So yeah, I don't know.
All right, on to the next. That seems pretty easy.
Here,
Assume you're folding. Yeah.
I'm not folding.
Yeah. We're both right.
I think specifically with these suits too, I wouldn't be folding.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand.
For anything bigger than the
Sounds marginal,
size, yeah. So I was gonna say for anything bigger than the size, I think we can fold. Like if he bets half pot, I think he's kind of starting to polarize himself a little bit. But for this size, like we have to defend like, what is it like 18? We can only have like 18-20% fold. And I think a hand like that has backdoor straight and flush draw potential probably doesn't make it into that category. But anyway, we'll proceed from here. I think it'll be interesting too to show you guys like how wide we're supposed to be defending versus smaller bets here when we're in position. So I think that's a lot of people are like way under defending these spots as well. This is kind of interesting. I would have expected a pretty high frequency check from villain on this card. I think this card favors our range more than his. So yeah. What are you doing here?
Based on that approach, it seems like this is like, it's just like you're never actually just shoving your flushes here, so it actually doesn't really make sense to shove, even though it's tempting with its exact combo.
Yeah, okay, and the flip side is, I think when he bets this big, he's really starting to polarize his range to like super strong hands, and then like hands he's like things are good enough to bluff off. So I think we're actually going to do like very low frequency jam here on the turn. I could be wrong, but there's definitely some spots here throughout this hand that I want to check out. So we are never raising here.
And notice how, yeah, even the call is like barely winning anything. Like with this many chips in the pot, it's only winning half of it long.
Right.
So we're in a hairy spot.
It's gonna be super easy. We either get there and we call, or we don't, and he checks and we bluff. Now that's things running like Pete and just gets there. I'm kind of curious what he has. So yeah, decent candidate. I still would think that since his card is so bad, he just does like a lot of small bet on the turn. Like I don't think he like the card's pretty bad for him, but I don't necessarily think he just always checks here on the turn. But I think most of his range probably wants to bet small on such a wet card.
Your instincts are, yeah. I mean, I'm with you. That I would think that you check this turn a whole lot just because bladders tend to have more suited combos than openers, but in this case, that is not the case.
So go up to Ace King. This is kind of crazy. Like Ace King of Hearts. Like yeah, just for example, Ace King of Hearts is pure betting here. This seems fucking crazy. And it's betting for a bigger size too. So I'm assuming is it bet folding? Or okay.
Right. So let's see position and position. So I guess we want to see like how many flushes does the button actually hit.
This turn spot has my head like hurting a lot.
There's actually not a ton of flushes in the overall scheme of things. Or flushes and I guess hands that are better than a single pair.
We're 30 bigs effective here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so we're still gonna have a fair amount of suited.
If you're gonna rep a flush, at least you kind of have to bet a credible size, like maybe a little smaller than 2/3. But I think it, like if I'm gonna bet there, which I'm probably not, you probably need to bet at least half pot there, I would think.
So what I was thinking in the spot, why I want to use smaller sizes, is because, like specifically when I was talking about the Ace King hand, like I don't think we would just want to be pure checking here, but I also think we probably get some bet. Now, if we just like blast off here, then we kind of force him to fold out like some of those hands that that he should be calling. Like I think Ace King of Hearts is pretty thin here if we bet big on the turn. And if I'm like on the button and I've had like Ace Five of Clubs, I'm probably like snap folding here. If I face a 2/3 pot bet. Now, if I bet like if I see a third pot bet, then I have to defend more of my range in that spot because I'm getting a better price, and we can't just allow him to bluff off with a smaller size. But the bottom line is that I wouldn't be surprised if we get big bet with flushes, but we're also going to have hands that we want to bet for value / protection that aren't flushes. And if we're just betting huge with all those hands, then we fold out that weaker part of the range that we want to have continue when we have like thinner value hands pretty much here because this board's just so wet. So yeah,
as you can see, Button has 20% of his range as hands that beat a single pair, which is, I guess, what we wanted to know.
So I guess the other thing I want to know is go ahead and bet 2/3 on the turn. I want to see. Okay, so we're still calling like Ace Five of Hearts here sometimes. I guess with the straight equity, so Ace 4, Ace 3 folds a lot more. I can't believe the spot right now. Actually, it's making my head hurt even more than it already does.
It brings me joy that there's still spots that can make your head hurt.
Yeah, I mean,
it humanize the whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this whole hand is sort of fact because there's like no checking on the turn from OOP.
This is one of the most insane hands I've seen for a while.
It's such an interesting turn card too.
And I guess like what I'm really trying to say is like the more dynamic a card gets, the like you still want to have value bets, but you just have to kind of size down because then you could just be piling in a ton of money when you could essentially be drawing dead. Like that's why I'm surprised like a hand like Ace King of Hearts is betting so big here on the turn. Maybe there's just so much value in like folding out maybe a hand like King 8 of Clubs, something like that. Anyway, what I did want to see is if we bet big on the turn with a hand like Ace King of Hearts and Villain jams. I guess for one, I want to see if Villain has, or if we on the button have jams versus the 2/3 pot size. And then if we do jam, does Villain bet fold a hand like Ace King of Hearts?
I was looking at one other thing just to see what the other combos of top pair are equal to the combos of hands that beat us. So we're actually completely indifferent there. But then he's going to have all these like open enders that make up another 20% of his range. It's actually interesting that these are all like right at 20%. And so now we have 40% of his range that's like never folding that we beat. So that's like already like making the Ace King like a more palatable proposition to continue blasting off with. But so what were you asking though? Sorry, I was.
Just bet 2/3 on the turn, like it's asking, and I want to see if we have jams on the turn versus this size, or if we're just pure calling.
Just like a little bit of mixing. Aces, no diamond makes sense.
Ace 9.
And you still play that.
So okay, so it does have some jam.
Kind of, you're mixing. You're still played sets.
So what are our bluffs?
Makes sense as a bluff. Sixes with a diamond.
Oh, that's sixes with that. Why did I see 6/5? Okay, yeah, that's fine. So I guess that's like it's one sense. Bluff, and then the other ones are just value hands that aren't always ahead, even when you get called. So yeah, I guess have the button jam here, and I want to see once we do jam if Villain's like folding like Ace Queen suited, Ace King suited, Ace probably not Ace Jack because it does have straight outs. No, it's pure calling. I just think when we're playing against an opponent and we take this line and they jam here on the turn, like Ace King and Ace Queen are just like drawing dead. At least that's my instinct. I don't know about you.
And if you call, you hate your life.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it really depends on. It's really player pool dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like one of the big differences between like live and online is like in these live tournaments. I mean. Yeah, these live tournaments, like you get in these spots where like you just find yourself making ludicrous folds because people are literally incapable of bluffing certain spots.
Yeah.
But and
also, if you're calling your right, they likely have a ton of equity still.
Yeah, well, yeah, between that and then I guess we're also just getting a price where we can end up calling off here. Now I think like if we bet like third pot here on the turn in villain jams, then we probably get to make folds with those like ace king ace queen hands because we're not getting a good price on the call. But yeah, this spot's making my head hurt.
Yeah,
This
so like
is a cash game spot.
you can see like compared to the size of the pot, it's not winning you a ton.
Hmm.
Like like even ace eight is winning you without a diamond is winning you 10% of the pot. So it's not a thrilling proposition.
Right.
Yeah, I I almost hate my life with big aces here. It's just so bad.
Yeah.
And like I said, I still think the biggest thing that's just like blowing my mind here is the turn bet percentage as well as the size. I mean, some small bet does get in there, which is good to see, but I just can't believe a hand like ace king, ace queen are like betting huge and then stacking off on this turn card where they could essentially be drawing dead. So it's either going up against sixes that's merging, or it's going up against like ace eight, ace nine, shit like that. Maybe some nine eight. I don't know if it gets in there or not, but
Yeah.
yeah, get me out of here before I throw up.
And we're learning. And you're right, these are the spots that like don't get studied quite as much. And like there's probably a bigger divergence between how population plays and like what solvers do too compared to like the button versus big blind stuff we've been looking at.
Hmm.
Like c betting strategies on the button are like probably like pretty normalized across like the player pool.
Hmm.
But in like these spots like strategies are still like probably more divergent.
Yeah.
But it's still been good to have the baseline. But then also these other like exploitative considerations we've talked about are like good too.
Hmm.
Here I would guess at a third that you might not get immediate folds from his under pairs, but you want to start building that bluff. Got the spade and the diamond working for you, and you probably don't have too much showdown with a hand like this, although it might work as a delay as well. And you can still call it check raise even though it's not super comfortable.
Yeah. I also think we probably get some check here as well. I mean, our hand still plays okay. Also, I think this board probably isn't like great for us. Like, I guess we do have some slow play, as we see from the ranges here. We do have slow played like aces through queens, so I guess we do have a few more overpairs here than maybe most people will. But I was gonna say in general, I think as a caller, this board probably isn't the best for us, and like we're not just gonna pure bet a hand like ace four of clubs here. You know what I mean? So. I think we might want to be a little bit more polar with our range here. I wouldn't be surprised to see if we get some big bet here as well. But anyway, just go with what you wanted to do. We'll see what they like.
Beaten by 0.02 bigs.
Gotcha.
And you're right, the big bet gets in there too for like the same amount.
Yeah, and we're still doing like a fair amount of checking with this hand too, which is pretty good to see.
Yeah.
I think I would rather like bet fold a hand that didn't have like backdoor spades going with it so much and kind of be okay because it's kind of easier to check fold to bet fold a hand like that as opposed to like getting in a sticky spot with this one.
I think I'm more likely to bet a hand that can withstand a check raise and check back the ones that can't because there is value in like realizing your equity with those hands with those gut shots in sort of a sneaky way.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll check that out to see which king 10 combos are more favored to bet on. This is something we'll look at once we get to the sun. All right, now I think we probably check behind.
Yeah, I'd agree here.
Not much you can.
Wow.
Although
that might
kind of start.
And this might have to do a lot with the
And
suits
like,
as well.
You're still getting immediate folds from like all the smaller pairs, all the sixes to up to jacks probably, or folding at least some of the time to bigger bets. So that's probably the argument.
It'll also be
It's
interesting.
important to recognize how like player dependent it is as far as getting blown off your equity. Like if you have a perfect, understanding of who villain is in these spots, like I get how, the guys that are laggy have the potential to blow you off the equity if you're going to be forced to bet fold a hand against a player that is likely to jam against you. But then, there's obviously player types where they're just going to basically have it if they're betting. So it's just crazy seeing how like the most modern, capable AI is like unlocking these new doors. But meanwhile, the actual fields that we're facing are like light years behind this technically, and so we have to assess like who our opponents are in order to justify like each of these plays. So it's just a really interesting like factor that I'm kind of noticing here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, and then again, going back to that,
like, I know you've been playing a lot of live, so like you do sort of start getting like a feel of like how people are like playing their ranges in these spots. And when you're playing a lot of live poker, it's not something you're ever really going to be able to quantify unless you're just like, I do know people who do this, who just literally take a note every single hand for what the action was to try to get some like sense of what the tendencies in the live player pool are. But yeah, that is where like the studying and then like the feel, intuition, and just experience like sort of come together.
Yeah, like studying who these opponent types are is like a huge factor. It seems like for live, like getting an understanding of what type of player you're up against with the physical, tells and any information you can get from them talking, their bet sizing, their age, like demographics, like that stuff all seems super important in live, so that you can start to get a feel of what sort of direction they're going to take on their strat. Because I'm not playing against crushers that are like studying, modern like GTO principles and stuff. Maybe late stage, like there's a couple of them, but these like $500, like it's definitely a different field than someone like Kurt.
I agree. The fields you're playing in are incredibly soft. Those like those like ring event $300 fields are amazing, and I think the more you study and put in volume in those fields, you're going to see some really good results, man.
yeah. So I guess I'll touch on that real quick here too before we move on. I think it's obviously important, as we were saying earlier, to like if you can pick up on player types, it's good to do that. They're obviously going to give you spots where like you might be more high frequency to bluff against one person, and probably just give up against other people who just aren't folding. But I only think that's like a small part of things. I think it's way more important for us to focus on what our own range is and to kind of pinpoint what our strategies should be. And then from that point, we at least have that solid foundation of what we want to do. And then once we have a stronger understanding of that, then we can start adapting our play based on what we perceive our opponents to do. I think like it's really gets into dangerous territory when you start doing all these exploitative things because you're assuming one thing about your opponent that again he might not even be assuming of themselves. A lot of people, they just blindly go through spots like, so how are we going to put them on a certain range if they don't even know how their own range is constructed? You know what I mean? So I think when we start making all these assumptions against other people's hands, we start kind of getting outside the territory of making like sound fundamental decisions. Although I definitely think it is important, just maybe not to the degree I think you guys might be talking about, but it absolutely does exist for sure.
All
right. Yep. So we check back here. And again, I think we're probably going to be more high frequency bet when we have these exact suits. I would have assumed maybe not so much when we have the king of diamonds as well, because then we like block backdoor flush draws that are going to fold immediately if we bet on the turn. So yeah, we'll check those out as well.
Switching to a showdown, or do you try to represent thin value with some sort of queen X?
Yeah, I guess the question is, do we get to bet? I think a hand like King Queen should be able to bet here. He's definitely going to have like, let's say like pocket jacks through pocket eights here. That might have to hero here. I think the stronger the queen, the more we want to be betting here. So I would assume that we probably get to bet some queen X here.
Probably 2/3, 80. Probably doesn't matter too much.
I'd go 2/3 here with most of my range, I think. Yeah, so it doesn't like going pretty big. So I guess we'll see if it actually does value bet with queen X here on the river. Wow, so it's folding a queen. I did not. Okay, yeah. So I would not expect anybody to fold the queen there. So that was like another assumption I wanted to make here on the turn. Like, if we double barrel on the turn, does our opponent fold queen X? I'm going to assume that most people aren't. And, here I go. Like, just as soon as I was talking about how we don't want to make assumptions about other people, I would definitely assume that most people aren't going to call with the queen here if we double barrel on the turn, or they aren't going to fold with the queen if we double barrel turn. And I would definitely assume most people aren't going to fold when we bet river and they have queen 10 in that spot. So
getting back to the flop now that we're in the sim.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, the first question we were asking is it better to bet with the spade or not with the spade with your king tens?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it is better to bet with a spade for likely the reasons I highlighted, that you can withstand additional pressure even when you have a hand that has, nutted equity.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have nutted equity, like you don't want to be forced to pile money in the pot, like with these sorts of hands that can't really withstand additional pressure,
Mm-hmm.
but can still win big pots if they do realize it. So I think that's probably the way to think about when you want to bet and when you don't.
Yeah, definitely more high frequency bet when you have the spades. Like that's how we find a lot of these unnatural bluffs that we come up with. Most of them are going to be oriented with the suit. And although we do a lot of mixing here too, we definitely, like Pete was saying, we definitely want to be a little bit more high frequency with the suits than without them.
It's interesting. Whoops, can you see that? Maybe that's just on my computer. It's interesting though that actually fours, and I'm guessing the same is true of threes, that are your sort of magic hand bluffs, the low unnatural bluffs, are actually choosing without the spade, and I have absolutely no idea what that's about.
Yeah, I've noticed this as of late as well, and that's probably just because fours with the spade might show down a little bit better, and then without the spades and diamonds, they have a little more incentive to bluff because they're worth less. And again, and I brought this up in other situations too, but essentially, the lower the pair, the more high frequency we want to be bluffing. That's why you see high frequency bets with pocket threes and pocket fours, and then a lot more checking with sixes and sevens.
Saying that these 10-8, that these are some of our other unnatural bluffs, just these. The spades make sense here, but the 7-8 actually checks back the 7-8 of spades, but then kind of starts going for it with the hearts and the clubs, and I guess it's because you're just going to have some turns, the sixes, nines, and whatever, that you can double barrel.
Also, you don't want to bloat a pot with a hand that has good equity, but not necessarily can withstand a ton of heat, like a hand like 8-7 of spades.
Right. So yeah, we're all learning here. This is all an exploration here for everyone.
Sure.
It's interesting. All right, what do we want to do next? Do we want to continue on?
No, I wanted to see on the turn here after we bet. So we bet on the flop. You bet a third pot, right?
Yeah. I guess first of all, let's get the check raising strategy is, and just so the most frequent size is the 50%. So I just want to throw that out there real quick to see how king tens respond. So yeah, as you might expect with the spade, 10 of spades, it's not as excited about, but king of spades is never folding. All right.
It's mixing a little, but I mean, not so much that I would ever consider folding.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So, but this is the response we wanted to see. You see, it's pretty aggressive with even just ace jack, ready to get the money in.
Ace jack is pretty nutted here, so.
So I can see how it's an extremely powerful line to understand where you flop, say, some nutted equity like a Broadway draw, where you'll still basically have control of the hand in a sense that you can take it down on the river when you brick, but you also need to get in cheap enough to not get blown off where you can still realize that equity with the proper running. So I need to really study that factor a lot because there's tons of Broadway gutters that I'm dealing with in my game that I need to learn how to navigate a little better because I am getting blown off of those hands a lot, trying to represent my ace that I should have in my range or whatever. So I just kind of picked up on something there with your comments.
Yeah, so
good, and you'll notice that a lot, that with sort of the draws that have sort of middling that they can't, I mean, the same thing we've been saying before, that they can't stand a ton of heat, that they often actually play more passively for I guess that very reason, and as a way to protect your turn and river ranges when you do get there. If you want to have some nutted combos where if the jack comes after you check back, but they assume that you're always betting your gut shot on the flop, that then you can never have nuts, which is like you kind of always want to construct your range in a way where it's possible to have the nuts on turns and rivers at least some of the time.
Yeah, so again, I'll touch on that real quick. So in general, when you do get in these spots, I think it's always best, like Pete was saying, like these middling ones. Like for example, we were talking 8-7 of spades in a spot like this. So I think from at least from the general population, I think a lot of people their first instinct is just like, oh, I have a flush draw, I'm gonna bet. Like it's great if I get a fold and whatever I can call a check raise, but really getting check raised like with a hand like A7, 8-7 kind of sucks here. Like it's not a hand that can withstand a lot of heat. It's also good to have some checkbacks with some flush draws because then once you turn a flush, like you have them in your range, and if you're just betting every single one on the flop and you check back flop, turn comes flush, you never have a flush. So it's basically just a way to stay more balanced. It's going to be easier to call more aggression, like some delayed bets on the turn. And then also, I think the biggest thing you really want to ask yourself when you get in a spot like this is like, how bad would it suck if I get check raise off this hand? If a hand can easily like play for stacks, then yeah, it's probably going to bet a little more high frequency if you have like a really good draw here. But then a hand like 8-7, like yes, it has decent equity, but it doesn't necessarily want to play for stacks on a board like this. Like you're drawing pretty thin even against top pair. Opponent can easily have like better flush draws in this spot. So I think if you're kind of struggling in that area, just the first thing you want to ask yourself is like, you know, can I easily play for stacks with a draw like this,
Yeah.
or is this kind of gonna get really sticky and uncomfortable if I bet here and I get check raised? So I guess that's kind of like a
Yeah.
basic way
Although
to
just
proceed
think
it.
about thinking about spots being uncomfortable. But yes, that's a heuristic. That's good.
Yeah.
And so and you'll see this on the turn even more, where like you might like turn some backdoor equity, and it seems like such a slam dunk to continue. But then like I'm sure we've all had those moments where like you get check shoved on then, and you just have to fold this like boatload of equity.
Yeah.
But it's like you're just not getting the right price, and it's just like you hate everything about your life at that moment.
Yeah.
So it's often good in those spots too. I guess is the point that they when they can still have check raises. Now there is occasionally like turn cards where villains should just basically have zero check raises, although like occasionally they still will just happen, and then you also question everything you know. But for the most part, like yeah, it's good to be checking those spots back. And then you have like sneaky hands too when you do get there, which is good.
Mm-hmm. That I also think that a lot of people don't do because I think everybody's like natural instinct, even like beginners to like mediocre players, they're just like, oh, I have a draw, I'm gonna bet, I'm gonna push my equity. If I get a fold, that's great, and then I have a hand that has decent outs if I get called. So I think that's everybody's natural instinct to kind of do that. But it's also nice to have Odin to know that these hands like really kind of mix up the play, and then you can kind of like check out all your draws here and see which ones are like more so than not betting for value, and which ones are or betting a little more high frequency, and which ones are checking at a high frequency. So
And then it's interesting to note like the difference between the outs that a flush draw has and the obviousness of flush draws hitting when the flop has the flush draw versus like turning the flush draw and rivering. And then with the king 10, it does have like a little bit of a different amount of like showdown equity on the 10 and the king pairing as well. So it's just like, dude, it's just so complex how this game works. But I do play those like kind of differently as well, based on that, like the 8-7 suited versus the king 10, because of how masked the straight draw is versus the flush draw. If that makes sense.
yeah. Oh, I was gonna bring up another point about that spot. I'm just brain farting here right now, so yeah, I guess go to the turn two and see once we double barrel. I'm just kind of curious how wide villain is supposed to be defending.
That's what I'm looking at already as I'm looking at what his non-top pair range looks like, and it's a lot. And so now it's making sense why like you barrel here so much. Because what it's 15, 40, 74. Like 80% of his range is going to not be trips. I guess I could have done with the other, but yeah.
And then we also have to hope that they're going to fold the queen on the turn, which I'm guessing Odin is probably going to do. So if it's defending, then it's only defending. Yeah, so it's folding queen X immediately, or at least it's mixing a little bit more when we block straight draws as opposed to when we don't. So I guess it's just defending with like, I mean, I guess looking at this range, there is just like a fair amount of ace X we have here. Like there's a fair amount of trips, and then I guess we're gonna have some flush draws we defend with. Oh, what I wanted to say about the king 10 spot too is I actually, it is pretty close to like the nut no pair in that spot, but also I don't expect cutoff to ever be checking back a worse hand. So I actually don't think it really has any showdown in that spot. So
right. That's something I was thinking about recently. Is that it's like often like easy to convince yourself you have like showdown in spots where you don't actually have showdown. Like that's probably one of my bigger weeks in certain spots is like not attacking the spot aggressively enough.
And I guess like some weaker players, they will show down worse because they, just most weaker players and mediocre players just don't bluff enough. So maybe it does show down a little bit better.
Yeah, but when you think about like what's the worst hand, like Jack 10 is like the only worst hand that really King 10 beats. That's check calling this flop and maybe a couple weaker flush draws. But other than that, like when you have the 10 and you have the spade in your hand, then like you're just eliminating even more of those potential combos. So
right.
So in reality, and then you're just getting these like immediate folds from, these other lower pocket pairs. It's interesting that tens is a pure. Curious.
Yeah, especially since I would assume we're supposed to be pretty high frequency bet with King 10, Jack 10.
Yeah,
or at least it's mixing.
Curious.
I mean, I guess we don't have to get so nitpicky, really, with just one specific hand, but
yeah, my own ADD take control.
That'll happen.
So I guess now the question is if he does check call here and what was it in reality? I guess we'll just choose what it was in reality. Established a more King 10 then gives up. I'm kind of curious. So just sort of he's choosing these like non-interactive for the most part type of hands.
Yeah, I'm gonna assume with our exact combo, like we definitely give it up. I think we probably can fall through when a spade comes, but our hand definitely makes a give up when we fade here, because essentially we're double barreling here to most likely follow through on spade runouts. And then also, like, if we do hit a king and they do have some queen X that continues, we have a decent amount of equity as well. So interesting. Oh, so this is like a really interesting spot here. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, I'm just trying to like quickly discern why it's mixing like this in terms of how it's selecting what to bluff and what to not bluff.
I was gonna say it's interesting to see that the king of spades mostly gives up and the 10 of spades mostly bluffs, but I also see the flip side on some of these as well. Yeah, so this is I'm kind of curious about this as well. Again, this might be getting a little bit nitpicky, and we can maybe talk about this in another spot. But
Yeah.
I would.
It seems like it has something to do with like the amount of like backdoor diamond floats that are going to be like automatic folds for cutoff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have the diamond in your hand, it's not as good. So when you have king of spades, 10 of diamonds, like he can't have like Jack 10 of diamonds or whatever would be like his automatic fold on the turn. So some has something to do with that.
Yeah.
I'm not explaining it very well, but all right, maybe let's do a couple more of these. You are right. We're getting a little in the weeds.
Yeah.
A lot of these nitpicky spots.
Yeah. But either way, I guess
to like when you're doing this on your own, like it might be a little dry for you guys to listen to, but when you're doing it on your own and you do see those like subtle differences, it is good to ask yourself the question like why would it be doing this? And then the second question would be, well, I'm not gonna be able to apply this perfectly, but what are the heuristics or lessons I can learn in order to like more refine my general overall poker thinking?
Exactly.
Which is what ultimately this sort of studying is exactly about. It's not about being 100% precise in every single situation. It's about developing heuristics and things that you can implement in game.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm here. I've actually, my default would be to check, but I feel like in just a little bit I've been playing around with it. I've seen more small betting in these spots than I would have guessed. But I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, if we're gonna bet this hand, I would assume it's probably gonna be for the small size. I mean, this hand isn't like really worth a big bet in this spot, and also it's kind of nice to kind of protect with our hand. It also can probably face a check raise, has decent backdoor equity if we're not ahead now. Um, and then also like the deuce doesn't really hit buttons range that well either, so we might be a little bit more aggressive here on like 10-9 deuce as opposed to 10-9-6, 10-9-5, stuff like that. Also, I think just in general on these rainbow boards, I think the player who is raising ends up c-betting a little bit more aggressively because there's just going to be less natural floats that imposition is going to have. So, yeah, be interesting to see what they do here.
Yeah. What would your default be in game, though, do you think?
Probably check. But I might roll here. I might roll like 30% bet here.
Yeah, it actually does check. Almost always. I've definitely seen some similar spots, though, where it's betting second pair that, like, was not intuitive to me, like, at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it gets to. It's obviously a hand that can, like, even call this and even call bigger turn bets, or maybe even check shove bigger turn bets.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we have a choice but to call.
Curious what villains most frequently used sizes are on the
Actually,
on the flop there too.
interesting. It leads 40% of the time on this turn.
Oh, my head's hurting again.
Yeah, it seems like something I'm just never gonna figure out.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like we do have some 8-6, we have some Jack-8. We're gonna have some 9-7. We're gonna have, I don't even know if pocket sevens calls versus a bet that big on the flop. Versus a third, obviously it does. I'm not sure versus 2/3. So yeah, we'll tackle that after. I guess we'll just finish the hand and go from there.
Definitely wants you to stick it in.
So yeah, I was gonna mention that. So when they bet so big, so this is why I kind of like don't understand why the size is being used here too, because it's kind of like, you know, if we want to set stacks up a little bit better. What do they call that? Help me out. I'm brain farting.
Make it geometric.
Yeah, geometric betting. I think that makes like it would make a lot more sense in a spot like this. Now, it might kind of be okay for them to put us in a spot where we just have to be jamming or folding, and you see this quite a bit when there's such a large percentage of the pot being put in where you're basically just calling or folding. Now, if he bets like you know, between 6 and 8 big blinds on the turn, we probably get some call. But when they bet so big, and like, what do they have on the river? Like 37 bigs in there, so they basically have a third pot left behind. So yeah, so you're essentially just like going with it, or you're folding. So
yeah, and it's like when you realize your equity, you're probably not going to get to see the rest of that pot anyway. So I guess that's the other part of it.
right.
4 straights, and let's say they do have like a set or something that you're gonna have to slow down. So that's probably another reason.
Think we get donk here before you hit check?
It had 0.
Did it?
And then I think we probably just have to. Yeah, it said 0 donk.
Okay.
I was looking for it, and then I think you probably just have to fold at this point. Yeah. We will once again bury our head in this. So I guess what we really want to see is what's going on with this turn sizing.
I want to see the flop size too, as well, used by villain. I think I mainly go small here.
Yeah. All right, so 7. I guess do we still have it up?
I want to see what he had too.
This one. Yeah.
I want to see if we got bluffed.
So we want to go back to the.
Yeah, I want to see the sizes I could use here on the flop. Because I think my default would be to go like small here. I think this board's pretty decent for the caller's range, so I just figure we get to be pretty aggressive for a small size quite a bit.
Where would you stop it? You went 4.6 in reality. Yeah, sort of the hands you would expect for the most part. I guess these suited wheel aces are maybe slightly exotic, but they make sense too. They pick up backdoor equity. in more ways than one. They block top of, or they block at least some of the overpair range of cutoff.
Yeah, so it is mostly going small here, though, right?
It's going, let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, like
yeah, so
46% of the
something
time
like
it's going
this.
small here. So again, I would probably just just default go small here and not really mix in much big bet, since obviously the small bet is predominantly being used in a spot like this. Now, like, it might be okay to implement this big bet, but just in terms of simplicity, it's probably best to just full range bet small. But I could be off there. Like I said, I've really been a big proponent of simplicity in the last few months. So
In terms of that, you would never find this lead.
true. Yeah,
Just to
this is
make
nuts.
sense with it. Yeah. Don't try to do this.
Yeah, because and the other thing is too, it's like I think a lead would make more sense if it was a hand that like had a fair amount of equity and would like benefit from getting a fold if we just donked here. And I think and that basically can't defend versus a bet on the turn. And I think our hand is definitely strong enough to check call here on the turn. So yeah, I'm really surprised to see lead being a thing here.
Looks like this 2/3 size is actually basically the only size. So we're not making a geometry.
Yeah, so that's interesting too.
Well, that might have something to do with choosing the bigger size on the flop, which like it's not doing very often.
Right, so maybe they just
ranges might be good.
yeah.
So let's just that. I mean, this is gonna mess things up entirely because in stacked pot ratio is gonna be different. But
I just wonder if it ever has bet folds there for the bigger size too. So
oh yeah, I guess we'll go back to the spades. Now, does it still do the lead versus the block? That's the other question. Does but not actually, but not as often.
right.
And actually then prefers to have the additional equity. That's interesting. But now let's see if it still wants to bomb it. Now it just kind of uses a mix of a 2/3 bet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, well, actually, it'll be more interesting because stack the pot's a little, so it does still just stick these hands in, stick the 8/9, which I suppose makes sense for the reasons we discussed.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, like,
You want
I guess in general, these spots are pretty sweet to take, mainly because villain's still gonna have hands that are like worse than us that are gonna stack off, and then when we're called, we have decent equity as well if we're behind. So it's kind of sweet to find these plays here. I think a lot of people's instinct would be to mainly just check call with a hand like 9-8 or even 8-7 here. Um, so yeah, kind of curious to see that like if just pure check jams 9-8, but mainly just check calls a hand like 8-7. Maybe more so because it blocks a hand like 9-8 blocks a hand like 10-9 that's gonna snap you off and have you in bad shape, as opposed to 8-7 not really blocking that so much, if I had to guess. I just feel like if he makes it this big, like he just never has bet folds.
ace jack?
He's,
And I guess these suited wheel aces are just going for it still.
that's
It's something you
nuts.
see sometimes.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Call, it's the same as a lot.
Alright. Keep going, do a few more.
Yeah, we've got this going for an hour 23 right now, so yeah, we can keep
Yeah.
going a little bit more.
I was thinking maybe switch it to low jack the button to wrap it up, just
I mean, we may as well stick with the trend we've had today, right?
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, we are getting more of a mix of in position.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, wrong button. Smart buttons. And
I
lucky.
got us. Fucking
Congrats.
got us. Guess that's another reason why check jamming is good there on the turn.
Although I'm assuming based on what we saw that King Jack is still calling, which makes sense because double gutter.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's why it makes it that size because it really sucks. But once it makes it that big, it just has the right price to end up calling off there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess we should have looked at that at the time, but it doesn't really matter. We can just probably assume that that's the case there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
what do you want to do here?
Thinking 2/3.
Do you have a check here?
Check with the intention of check raising.
Well, that too.
Yeah, I mean, there's both people have the same amount of sets, and otherwise both ranges are going to be pretty wide.
No, Button's not gonna have pocket eights.
On overcard.
Button won't have eights. I would assume Button's gonna play for stacks with eights for 30.
Mm. Yeah, actually, I have like a pure jam from eights there. All right. So we actually have the range advantage. So that means I think we can probably choose a bigger size.
Yeah, and again, I think on these lower boards, when we do bet, we probably want to go a little bit bigger here. We're not going to be like full frequency betting here either. But so when we do, I think we probably want to go a little bit bigger here. Like specifically, if we have a hand like Ace 8 or King 8, like these hands are obviously really good on the flop, but there's like so many turn cards that could drastically change the value of a hand like that. And if we just bet like a third pot here, they're still supposed to defend like 80% plus of their range here. So I think these boards benefit more from a bigger size. Now I would definitely mix all three options between like 2/3 check call and check raise with a hand like this. So I think all three options are probably fine here.
Well, actually prefers the 90%, which is not totally exercised. 0.01 big line, so it doesn't really matter. This seems like checking is actually still winning. Slipping more.
And for what it's worth, I would not have bet pot in this spot or close to it.
And now this seems like sort of a slam dunk triple barrel.
I wouldn't be surprised if we give up here.
I'm actually probably only uses the third size and actually probably use 2/3 because it's the fourth flush card, so he's gonna have tons of auto fold with his floats that didn't pick up a flush draw. So I think you just get that small here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what our best bluffs here are on the turn. Because like when we bet 2/3 here, like he's obviously calling a stronger portion of his range. He's also gonna have like full weight, fours and deuces, ace 5. Should have some 5-6 suited if I had to guess. I'm not sure what these ranges are, but I would definitely have 5-6 suited here. But this is obviously like pretty low in our range. The other point is that it doesn't have a whole lot of equity here. So yeah. Anyway, go ahead. I'm curious to see what'll happen here. So it does bet. Yeah, it's just.
I think my assumptions were right on these Badoogie turns. You can use smaller sizing because it's just going to be efficient. It will efficiently get all the overpairs of the backdoor flush draw to fold.
Right. So yeah, so any like two overs with backdoor flush draws just have to auto fold even to the smaller size. So yeah, good eye there.
And we have 7 high on a river. I think we just got a rip.
This king's gonna be better for us than it is for him too. So.
Us?
Oh.
We putted.
Maybe that's just because
10%.
it might be because we bet so big on flop and turn that Villain's range is just too strong.
Well, we bet small in turn, but the fact that he's able to continue with the combination of the both.
I mean, I would never bet small here. Oh, he got tarped. So yeah, I would probably pure jam once we got to the river on that specific card too. But I think a big portion of why we give up is because we bet big on the flop and then he continues on the turn as well when he's, like we said, he is folding all those auto folds that he has are probably giving up there. So it's just like his range is probably exactly. That's what I want to see. We are still betting quite a bit.
Those are the non ones. So Queen 6, so it likes it having the 6x. Just wants you to have a bigger card with it. King 6, Queen 6. Sarah bluffs.
Oh,
So not totally.
Odin, my brain.
And then it does it with the hearts, but not so. Everything was real close.
When I call it jam there with aces, the guy definitely has 5'6" and not 6'7" there. Just saying.
Yeah, you might be
True
right.
that.
And I guess one thing that I'll also say too about a lot of these spots here is I'm definitely like really tight with my calling ranges when opponents out of position and they're the pre-flop raiser and they just triple barrel. I think they're so much more weighted to have it in spots like that as opposed to if like they open hijack and they triple barrel into your big blind. So yeah, I just think these spots are super
I know some
underbluffed.
populations level studies, like when people have like looked at like aggregate number of hands, that people overfold, people both under triple barrel and people overfold two triple barrels. So like it's good to fold to people triple barreling, but it's also good to triple barrel yourself.
Right.
Like kind of not with reckless abandon, but like there's a lot of spots where people are overfolding because they think, and perhaps they think quite rightly, that like if unless they know who you are, unless it's like a reg versus reg situation, that they think quite rightly that like most people, it's a good assumption to make, are not triple barreling thin or with bluffs. So then they make the big fold. So then the ranges get all out of whack.
Right. All right, cool.
But yeah. All right. I don't know, 2, 3 more. Try to make it to the top of the hour and call it a day.
Sure.
All right, so we'll say 18 more minutes.
I forgot too. So like I only full screened this session halfway through because I forgot I was recording at some point because I wanted to keep up with the chat just to see if anybody was keeping up there. So just to let you know, guys, I haven't been watching the chat here since I full screened here. So I guess just double check real quick, see if anybody talked in the chat.
Yeah, I've been going back. I've been going back and forth a little bit.
Okay, cool, cool.
Not giving it full undivided attention. Kenny's in there though.
All right, nice.
Here, probably do either or. Good to pick the check back range. It's also good to start getting a little bit of value, but
yeah, I roll here.
Yeah. We'll check. See, actually, pure checks. Good to know.
That's interesting.
An
I thought
example.
It might be like 30% bet or 40% bet, but maybe that's just because like I mean, it's not that we never have the nuts because we do have aces and kings, although that's like a really small part of our range. We never have like ace queen, ace jack here, I'm pretty sure.
All right, so we have like our best ace-x combo, perhaps, or one of our best.
Right.
Anyway, this is for trivial.
So yeah, so far I guess the most interesting spot is going to be like what do our frequencies look like on the flop when we're checked too.
Pretty trivial. Guess you can even shove it insane, probably just to like try to get him off chops or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I really like to I really like to check on the flop with the ace nine because one, if he has something like king queen or king jack, check back's gonna make him a little more confident. Also, if he does have his beat, we're just pot controlling and making it more manageable on the turn the river a bit. I like the spot there with ace nine specifically.
Yeah, but it's also good to be putting in money when he has a hand like king queen too, because he's never gonna fold that on the flop, and then you get a little extra money and don't allow him to draw for free. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be like checking pure here. Although I'm pretty surprised to see how much it is checking. Obviously, like the weaker our ace x is, the more we want to be checking. And I guess this one just checks high frequency because it's the worst offsuit ace x that we have. And then you see the worst suited ace x's are checking a little bit more.
And then it still traps to ace 5 though. That's sort of a general rule of thumb is when you have top and bottom, you slow play it. Not entirely certain why that is, but I've noticed that.
Well, you mix
up in a lot of
anyway.
Spots, like whether it's from big blind or like I've never seen it in these imposition spots, but it's holding true here too.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of weird to me a bit.
Well, yeah, so like let's say for example that somebody somebody thinks that like when we check back here, like we're capped, and they're just like overly blasting off once they realize like we don't have any strong hands in our checking range, so they can basically just like close their eyes with any two cards and blast off. And if we never have any of these strong hands that we're checking back, then they're going to make more money on their bluffs than they would otherwise if we were actually checking back some stronger hands. And this is another thing I think that a lot of people do too much is they bet a little too high frequency with a lot of their value. And if somebody is like capable of recognizing that this player is probably betting a little too much with his value and not checking back enough, then in turn they're probably going to bluff a little bit more aggressively, and it's going to work because when we check back, we're not going to have those strong hands like Odin has here. So I'd say this works a little bit better to be trapping these hands against opponents who are capable of bluffing or maybe recognizing that we might be quote unquote capped in a spot where we're actually not. So yeah, I think this is definitely interesting. Like in practice, for sure, it's good to be slow playing here, but against opponents who aren't capable of bluffing enough and also like don't fold enough, we might just be able to like pure bet with our value in these spots. So
Is there any merit to slow playing more with like ace king top two pair because you're just blocking so much of their value range?
as the pre-flop raiser,
Yeah, like let's say I have ace king here as the pre-flop raiser. I'm
Mhm.
almost always going to be checking in real time because I feel like I'm not sure what I can get called with by worse a lot of the time here, unless it's like ace jack type situation, which I'm most likely getting three bet anyways. Um, so
You
I'm
can
not.
see it. Your intuition there is pretty much right. That it's checking ace king for the most part from the cutoff on the flop.
it's also checking most of its range in that spot too. So
Yeah, well that too. But the ace queen and ace jack then are the one you got your
I
most
guess
frequent
the
bets.
more generalistic question here is my intuition tells me when I slap the flop to slow play a lot when I'm blocking a decent amount of what I'm hoping my opponent would have. Like if I'm blocking aces and kings, like what am I really hoping they have here a lot of the time?
Well, it's going to be different when you're 30 big blinds deep versus when you're like 50 or 100 big blinds deep because, like, when you're 100 big blinds deep, you probably just kind of want to start like shuffling money in as quickly as possible. But when you're 30 bigs deep, like you can still like play for stacks on two streets, so you're not as worried about like maximizing your EV by checking flop.
Yeah, and definitely if we're still like in like a rebuy period or something, I'm not slow playing nearly as much.
Here, let's see, like, let's run it at like 50 and
I
see if
appreciate
it's still,
that.
see if it's still slow playing.
More just a curiosity because this is a situation I find myself in a decent amount.
But-
Flop top two pair with a few face cards and not sure if I should be high frequency leading or if I should be just checking a lot of my value hands. Even in position in like a three bet pot, like let's say it comes like ace king, six. I still would know how to play that a lot of the time. Although I do want to lead a lot of my three bets in position.
you mean c-bet
You
is
can
what you're
see
talking about?
Yeah. See, this is good.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
see,
like-
so
Go ahead.
you're betting more for probably the reasons that I highlighted was that like you're just and the other reason is that like you saw at 30 button could have like the set like aces and kings sets still, but here button has none of that. Button's always three betting.
yep, thank
So
you.
like with the top two pair, it looks like it likes a little bit of a smaller size, and with like ace queen, it likes a bigger size.
Right, because he's gonna have some, it's gonna make his king expert more, and yeah, that's
I
probably
like
the main reason. That it's
Appreciate
like
you looking that up.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest point that you made there too. Is that at 50, button never has like aces and kings here, so we probably get to be more aggressive in general here, as opposed to at 30. So yeah, I think Pete touched everything pretty well there. But I guess on the flip side, Kenny, it kind of sounds like you just want to slow play hands because you block so much value, but you also kind of have to recognize when the board is good for your range and when it's better for your opponent. because like yeah, you do block a lot of stuff, but he's still gonna have plenty of like gut shots. He's gonna have top pair. He's gonna have second pair. He's gonna have like 5-4 suited that he's not gonna be folding. So they're still gonna have plenty of hands that can call you there. And yeah, you're gonna bet sometimes, and you're just gonna take the pot down. But there's still gonna be plenty that he can call you with. And I think it's more important to kind of recognize which boards are good for you to be attacking, and not so much like, oh, I block so much value, so I'm just gonna check your high frequency. Because if you're doing that, then you're just not putting in enough money when you have the stronger part of your range. So you're not going to be making as much money as you would if you like mix a little bit more bet in there as opposed to just high frequency checking. And I think specifically on this Ace King X board, this is going to be way better for the razors range than the flat callers range, because at least at 50, like we said, the button should never have Ace King, Aces, and Kings. So we're going to have a significant advantage of nuts in the cutoff over the buttons range. So we're not thinking in the spot so much like, oh, we block so much, so we're going to check here and either let our opponent catch up or bluff. We're like, oh, this board's really good for our range. I'm going to be aggressive with both my value and my bluffs. And it's kind of like the flip side of that example I gave earlier on today when on the 7-6-3 all clubs, where like it's not the greatest board for us. So we're going to have like a fair amount of checkbacks because it's not great. But we're also going to have some slow plays there too. I think I kind of trailed off there with what I wanted actually. So, but there's just a difference, and like I would be more so checking like some stronger hands on the 7-6-3 because the board's not as great for us, and then maybe be pushing my equity a little bit more on an Ace King 5 because it is a board that's better for our range. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, one situation I would be more aggressive with my stronger hands, and in another spot I would be a little bit more mixing up my strategy on boards that aren't quite as good for us.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Final one?
Sure.
So, you've only done 6 hands so far. My original idea was we would be able to get through about 25 per session.
You were out of your mind.
That was optimistic.
Yeah.
All right, this is
I think
interesting.
you learn more digging deeper.
Of course.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's more important, I think, to kind of like find the little tendencies that Odin uses, and not so much, just blast through a whole bunch of hands. It's just as important to like know why Odin is doing what it's doing as opposed to what it's doing, because if we just like blindly look and don't make any conclusions on our own, or kind of pick up on certain trends, then we're not really learning anything, So we're just seeing one example and seeing what it does and being like, oh, cool, next hand. So yeah, I think it's better to like deep dive.
And as humans, the way our brains sort of work is that we have to like translate the data into language in order to be able to like employ it for future use. I'm sure you're going to develop some like intuition and instinct by doing this that like you can't exactly explain with words, but if you can explicate it linguistically, like through via language, then like you're gonna like set yourself up for like more success in the future. Like just because you're gonna be able to like explain to yourself why this spot is like that spot. And then that's how you like sort of like begin to like really pick up on the patterns from something like greater than just a intuitive level.
Sure.
In general, being able to explain something takes a pretty high level of comprehension. So I do think that's a pretty good practice. And even in my own study sessions, I definitely just like ponder aloud the questions that I'm trying to dig into, because I try to explain it to myself if possible, just to make sure I'm understanding what's happening. And if I don't, I have a little notebook that I just jot weird stuff and spots down in, and I periodically, once a quarter or something, will cycle back. Well, this was pre-Odin, and see what I currently think about those spots after what I've learned in the past 3 to 4 months. But
what's good about having those things to reflect on too is that you can see how your thinking has changed, but then you can also assume that like other people are probably still thinking the way that you're thinking. So it gives you some insight into like what some percentage of the population is thinking about too, who aren't like totally digging into the selfers.
I agree, but sorry to derail the last
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So this is actually sort of an interesting spot. My instinct is probably a small raise against such a small bet is for no other reason equity denial, and that we still have like one of our best hands on the button when like our ace queens, ace kings I don't know. Kurt?
Well, obviously, the smaller he bets, the more we need to raise. Because if we just allow him to make this bet and he just gets free see a free card every time, then that's kind of advantage him in general. Like the smaller your opponent bets, the more raises you need. Also, the smaller he bets, the wider he can be betting. So a hand like Ace Ten is probably a lot stronger against whatever the size is of one big blind bet here, as opposed to if he just bets like 66%, where he's kind of polarizing his range. So here he's just kind of betting whatever. So against his bet size, his hand is probably stronger than it would be facing a bigger size. So for that reason, and the fact that we can't just allow him to bet this small and always get to see a turn card for just one big blind, I think we definitely work a little bit of raise in here. I don't think it's pure. I also think this is going to be one of the stronger ace X's we're going to have. So of all the ace X's that are one pair, this is probably the highest frequency raise that we're going to have here. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some call, but I think it will mostly raise.
And a preference on the size end. I'm guessing the difference is probably negligible.
Yeah, I would probably go like 4 big blinds here if I was thinking. I mean, again, this is kind of a spot where I've been working on like when it uses specific sizes that are kind of whatever. I know the EV difference is kind of whatever, but it's still kind of nice to know when it's using one size over the other. Yeah.
So it does. It says it uses 45 more, but it's literally the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing as call. Everything's the same. It's impossible to make mistakes in poker. Is what it's done.
Still surprised to see it
now we're getting
calling as much as it was, but now we're getting
You.
now we're just thrown in the absolute blender.
Well, not blocking flush draws and backdoor flush draws is pretty good. We definitely can't fold, and then having backdoor potential with the straight. Wow, so sometimes it just plays for stacks.
Sometimes just zips it in there still.
And like, so I
It
think
is kind of disgusting sometimes. Like,
if Odin does it, it can be like have a.
No.
I mean, ace nine eight.
Stuff, are we gonna lose it?
Oh Christ! Oh yeah, we are gonna lose this. So I was gonna say, if you see some random opponent do this in game, then yeah, I'd be like pretty nervous. But I guess if Odin is doing this, it's probably balancing its range a little bit more than some random player would be doing. So I guess I'd be a little bit more inclined to stack off versus Odin as opposed to some dude in the big 11.
Yeah. You did not lose it.
wow, that's kind of cool. Did they just fix that or something?
I think so. I think I noticed it in the past couple of days. Now when he checks again after 3-betting flop, I am
sailing
down a creek without a paddle.
Like, I'm probably checking it real time here, but I feel like that's probably what he wants. He's probably 3-betting that flop, thinking that we'll freeze and he'll get 2 cards instead of 1.
Yeah. I'm just saying block is good, but this really small block isn't gonna get him to fold any of the big draws. So it's got to be this one or just shove.
I think you either shove here in real time or check, probably.
I think if I have diamonds or spades, I'm probably like gonna find a check here. But I'm blocking both flush draws and backdoor flush draws. I'm probably just gonna fast play this and rip.
Yeah. So it does choose the 33% the most.
Okay.
But again, it's pretty negligible. Mostly negligible.
Got us.
Wrecked. Just absolutely thrown in.
It kind of makes sense, to be honest.
Well, but
I pressed
yeah.
the wrong thing. No.
Then the flip side is too, though, that Odin's not just gonna have the nuts there. You know what I mean? It would make sense if you're against some random in a $10 tournament, but we're going to assume that Odin is going to be balanced in this spot, right? Like to value in bluffs, like it has to be, So obviously it makes sense when he flops over the nuts. Half his range is going to be the nuts. The other half is probably going to be strong draws or give ups that he just automatically folds to. So yeah.
It's also important to note that in a reasonably priced tournament, people are just generally, sometimes with a pair and a flush draw, or even like a good flush draw, just gonna rip it there. Like it's not optimal, but I see that a lot.
Well, that's why I kind of want to see what Odin does with its range after it three bets flop and then gets to the turn. Like I want to see what its give ups are. I
It's
want
like
to see what its
once you
slow plays
lead,
are.
let's say I lead with a king high spade hand here, and I get raised. It's like I don't know what I want to do at that point. Either I'm probably ripping or flatting, but I'm never folding.
Well, see where Odin's bluffs are there. Three bet bluffs. I guess it's gonna be some queen jack, queen 10, jack 10 with spades and diamonds. I would guess would be pretty high frequency. You know, just getting in there a little bit, and then just like random value with like ace jack, ace queen, ace king. It's kind of merging with like what was that? What did I see there? Did I see some 10-8 in there? Yeah, but not very much. So it does look like it's mostly value here. So Odin's going to be mostly value in this spot. I'm going to guess most humans are just going to be like always value in this spot. Like I don't think anybody's ever finding the three bet with like queen 9 here.
Like my intuition, if I see this hand in like a 109 on ACR, is that I am just fucking crushed when he makes it like 8.6 here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my intuition says, though. That's not to say that that's right or wrong.
No, I would say that's mostly correct.
Screaming.
I mean, we're just having a hard time finding what the bluffs are from Odin. So, like, against some random, like, they're probably going to be way more weighted towards bluffs. I mean, towards value here.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Interesting final one to cap it off.
Well, then I guess go to the turn here, too, because I want to see...
Yeah, what was it again? It was...
something at deuce of diamonds, maybe?
It was...
It didn't bring straight draws, but it brought a flush draw.
Backdoor drum, yeah. So that's probably irrelevant as to what it is. So yeah, then you can see that the ace 9 splitting, just ripping all of its, or only its jack 10 with additional equity. It's just going ham with jack 7.
And I don't think anybody's doing that. So we can just assume that when we see this in game, we can probably make some hero folds in the spot. This is why I would not have a 3-betting strategy here in general, I think. You know, if you knew your opponent just thought like you were super nutted here and you're making hero folds with ace 10, then maybe you should find those like 3-bet bluffs. But then we also have to assume that they're gonna fold a hand like ace 10 of hearts too, which I'm just done assuming people are gonna fold like any kind of value in certain spots. But yeah. I just wouldn't have a 3-betting range here in general, I don't think, in cutoffs shoes. But it's still good to see that Odin is doing this and to kind of see what it's doing it with.
We did choose the small block size, the 15% on the button, and then he ripped us in. Then even Odin begins folding the ace 10 a little bit.
Also with this exact hand, ace 9, with 2 spades on that flop, getting raised, I am probably 3-betting there. I don't know if I'm jamming or making it 8 bigs, but I just think the hand does need a little bit of protection, probably.
It does, but I guess the flip side, if you're saying that, I would say that my opponents also like under raise versus c-bets, even in position. So I would just kind of assume that they probably are a little bit more weighted towards value than any kind of semi-bluff. That might not be so true if we only bet one big blind, but I think in general, like people do under raise the spot in position when they are c-bet into. So yeah, just in general, I would assume that they were probably a little bit stronger than they should be. Other point I wanted to make here. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't care so much because like whatever. If a 7 or a 6 or a 10 or a jack comes and they end up making a straight, like whatever. It's just what it is, what it is, and then like we just jam here, they're gonna fold all their bluffs as well. So yeah, it's a tricky spot here. glad this is the last hand. My brain's becoming fried.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
think the pot has a decent amount of chips in it already. Where if I do get a bunch of folds here, I'm not super upset. We still won 47 bigs total. It looks like from 30 starting. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably fishy of me. Should probably just go for maximum value.
Uh, yeah, again, not necessarily because I do think that when, like, say we're in the cutoff and we face a raise from the button, I do think button in general is going to be more weighted towards value than bluffs. I mean, that's kind of how it is in almost every situation in poker. I mean, the lower the stakes, I think that holds true even more. So you could just exploitively like fast play your hand in a spot if you think that player doesn't really have any bluffs and just has hands that they're willing to go with. So yeah, I don't hate what you're saying by any means, but I also think it works a little bit better versus certain opponents as opposed to like players who are going to find like the thin raises, like either bluff raises or semi bluff raises on the button, and then maybe I'd be a little bit more inclined to slow play against them and kind of let them bluff off.
Yeah, definitely makes sense there.
All right.
Guess we can wrap this up. I don't know if anyone has any general questions or comments, but
Yeah.
thanks everyone for coming.
We can check the.
I think we learned some things. I think.
Go ahead, B.
Next channel looks clear, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so either somebody can hop on the mic real quick if they have anything they want to ask, or they can ask in the training sessions section as well. We'll be checking those out.
No, I was a little late. Sorry about that.
No, all good, Slammer. We actually have this one recorded, Slammer. So if you want to go back to the beginning, we can check that out. We started off with this like really interesting hand I think that I had from yesterday. So we spent about 20 minutes on that before we hopped into Odin. So I'm gonna send this to Max once we finish, and hopefully he'll have it posted either later tonight or sometime tomorrow. So yeah, you'll be able to check out the beginning anyway.
Was that the 10 queen?
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah.
So
I saw that one.
yeah, so
Hey, Kenny.
Sub Slammer.
Is your mom okay?
Yeah. They think she had a seizure, so they're keeping her for a few days to do some tests. But the shitty part is, she's COVID positive, so they're not letting any visitors in to see her.
Oh, God.
But yeah,
My
appreciate
prayers
you
are with
asking.
me.
best wishes
Thank
to
you
her,
very much,
bud.
man.
Was.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, best wishes, man. So yeah, I guess anything else before we wrap it up here? I know we went, about 2 hours here, so definitely I want to say thanks for sticking around here, guys. So if you have anything you want to ask, now's the time to do it.
Where will the video be exactly?
Probably post it. I think.
I'll be on the YouTube channel, and then I'm sure Max will make a post about it in I think there is a video channel as well, yeah. So Max will post it in videos, which is just in the main section of chats.
Yeah, I still have to bring up to Steve what he wants to do in the future with releasing these on YouTube as opposed to just like exclusively releasing them for the Discord here. I think you made up a good point with that, Slammer, as well. So we definitely need to address that in the future, and I guess see what Steve wants to do about that.
Yeah. But for now, it's the Wild West. Let it fly.
Yeah.
Let the videos fly. But yeah, I'm sure after the mint, things will get locked down, and we'll have to figure out some other ways to
sure.
post them in. I think that's all in the works and in discussion.
Yeah, I'm working on something there.
All right, cool.
Oh, all right. Well, perfect. Thanks again, everyone. I'm gonna go eat a steak and enjoy the weather. Hope everyone could do something similar.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to bed. Sorry guys for those of you coming in here pretty late. I'm feeling a little under the weather here today. Luckily, I'm feeling a little bit better than I did this morning, but I'm only on like 3 hours of sleep, so I at least wanted to join this session with you guys and be in here for Pete. But probably not going to be streaming today after 3 hours of sleep. I don't think I'll be bringing my A game, but I will be streaming tomorrow. Also, we'll be doing our usual session tomorrow at some point too. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be covering because I think we pretty much went through everything with the 10K. It's just going to be like a lot of three-handed play. So maybe we'll start tackling either some stuff with ICMizer. I know some people were asking about that. So yeah, I'll be asking what you guys want to do here in the Discord as well, and then maybe I can have something ready for tomorrow anyway. But yeah, good session, Pete.
Do you remember like years ago when we were in high school, we got those like fucking graph calculators. We thought we were so cool. I'd like play games on my calculator.
Super Mario.
Yeah, that's what I feel like with ICMizer versus Own It. It's like, I got a graph calculator. I need to figure out how to use this now. You know.
It's funny you bring that up. I was just back home over the holidays, and my dad dug it up out of some storage container. And the day before, we had discussed how I basically cheated in statistics class by like writing notes and storing them in the calculator so I could refer to them during tests.
Yeah, I used to.
All evidence. Yeah, I'm not gonna remember every formula. It was a nonsense request.
Dude, that's exactly what I did.
I feel like
Drug Wars.
What's that?
Go ahead, DMC.
Wasn't there a game called like Drug Wars that everyone was playing? I might be older than you guys.
Yeah, I'm 32.
Remember this? Yes, there was something
Ooh,
like that. I don't know the exact name, but something like that. Yeah.
That does ring a bell. We had that, and then we had like Zelda and what is it? The asteroid game, asteroids. All sorts of shit.
Nope.
We used to actually.
The name of that Super Mario game? What was it? Super Mario?
We had a random number generator on the calculator, and you could do playing cards, and we would do flips like during lunch off our graphing calculators, and like bet like $10 on like the outcome of a hand on our calculator. We were absolute degenerates from a very young age.
Nice. I graduated 03. I only had Super Mario. All right, guys. Yeah.
I gotta get going.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks
Cheers.
again for joining. We'll be posting again to see what you guys want to do for tomorrow's session. That should be starting at 12 Eastern time, and if that happens to change, I'll let you guys know ahead of time. So, yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody. This video should be posted sometime tomorrow, if I had to guess, if you guys came in a little late. So, yeah, thanks again, and hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.
Good sesh, fam. Have a good one.